Hi, my name is Scarlett. They always said I was the quiet one, the responsible one. I stayed behind while my sister chased spotlights. I paid bills no one thanked me for. I kept peace that nobody noticed. Until I said no. I refused to fund her Paris wedding. Just that, one no. Then she invited me to dinner. And she didn't come alone. 3 tattooed men stood beside her. She slid a contract across the table and said, "Sign it, or face the consequences." What kind of family sends backup when you won't pay for a fantasy? And what do when the people who raised you become the ones trying to erase you? Would you stay silent? Or would you do what I did? It started with a brunch invitation from my mother, the kind she liked to send with little flourish, like it wasn't anything but a casual Sunday meal in the backyard, potluck style probably. But nothing with my family was ever casual, especially not when Seraphine was involved. Charleston had just begun flirting with spring. Azaleas in full bloom, the air still cool enough to make linen feel like a smart choice. I pulled into my mother's driveway, took a deep breath, and told myself, again, this is just brunch. Don't assume anything. I had no reason to be anxious, except history. My mother's backyard looked like it had been styled for a magazine spread. Folding chairs were replaced with rented cream seatbacks, tied with pastel bows, and a large canopy shaded a catering table full of gourmet dishes no one in my family ever cooked. I spotted a few cousins I hadn't seen since Grandma's funeral. Everyone seemed to know something I didn't. "Scarlett, you made it!" Mom's voice was too bright, too rehearsed. "Come in, sit right there. We've saved a special spot for you." The special spot was dead center, just beside the mic stand. My stomach turned. A few minutes later, Seraphine arrived. Late, of course. Hair curled into effortless waves, makeup flawless, dress designer, undoubtedly. She gave me a glance that didn't reach her eyes, then turned to the crowd with the kind of confidence that only came from being the center of every story ever told in this family. "I know we're all here to catch up, but I have a little surprise," she said, her voice sugary and smooth. "Before we dig in, I want to take a moment to thank someone incredibly special." A hush fell. A screen lit up behind her. I hadn't noticed the projector before. Photos began to roll. Her engagement in Paris, venue, tours in France, mood boards with golden calligraphy and lace overlays. Then it landed. "Gratitude to our Paris wedding sponsor, Scarlett." My name, in bold, elegant font. Underneath, "Making dreams come true, one sisterly act at a time." The applause broke before I could process the punch. People turned to look at me, clapping, smiling. Some even said, "You're amazing," like I had just handed my sister the Eiffel Tower. I smiled. I clapped. My hands ached from the effort to keep the expression believable. I nodded. And inside, something cracked. I hadn't agreed to pay for her wedding. Not in Paris. Not anywhere. Not once had anyone asked. They had just decided. After the slideshow ended, I tried to step away, to get a breath, maybe a moment to think. But every cousin, aunt, and vaguely familiar friend of the family came to hug me, whisper compliments, or joke about how generous Scarlett's always been. By late afternoon, I left under the excuse of a work call. My mother kissed my cheek and said, "You really made her day, honey. I knew you'd come through." I sat in my car for 10 minutes, engine off, hands on the wheel. I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I just sat there, numb, until I finally started the car. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and tried to write a post. Something, anything, to set the record straight. But every draft came off as bitter, or worse, desperate. I deleted each one. Then Seraphine posted. A carousel of her twirling in the dress boutique, captioned, "The dream dress, the dream sister who gifted it. Thank you, Scarlett, Sacre Blessed, Cirque Wedding Magic." There it was. Twist the knife, twist it again. The comments flooded in. "You're so lucky to have a sister like Scarlett. Wow, that's love right there. She really is your maid of honor and your sponsor." I didn't respond. I didn't like or comment. I sat back on my couch, staring at the screen, feeling something boil slow and deep. I closed the app. I opened my voice memos. Not because I was ready to fight, but because I was done being quiet. I scrolled through old files, most of them grocery lists or ideas I never followed through on. Then I tapped the red button. Note to self, I whispered. Don't let them write the story this time. She would get an answer, just not the one she wanted. That thought stayed with me as I sat on my back porch, the breeze rustling through the wind chimes I hadn't heard in weeks. My phone rested on the glass table, beside a half-empty cup of coffee, voice memo app open, recording the silence that stretched too long. I finally pressed stop, then play. My name is Scarlett McKenna, I began, my voice sounding distant even to myself. And I'm tired of being everyone's solution. I let it run. I didn't agree to pay for Seraphine's wedding. I didn't buy her dress. I didn't volunteer to sponsor 27 guests on a European vacation, disguised as a ceremony. The words tumbled out slowly. I talked about the applause, the fake gratitude, the Instagram post that turned me into some fairy godmother I'd never signed up to be. I spoke about paying off Seraphine's student loan a decade ago, because she forgot to tell our parents she was about to default. About the time Mom needed a dental procedure, and I covered it because Seraphine's finances were frozen. They all praised me back then. Scarlett's so responsible. She always does the right thing. Always. But lately, the right thing started to feel more like the easy scapegoat. I saved the memo and named the file Pattern. A few days later, my mother texted, "Lunch? Just you and me. I want to clear the air." I hesitated, then typed, "Sure, name the place." We met at a small cafe near the riverfront, somewhere neutral. She was already seated, stirring her tea with a deliberate calm I didn't trust. I gave her a polite nod and sat down. "Scarlett," she began with that gentle tone she used when she wanted me to bend without breaking. "I know the brunch caught you off guard, but come on. You're the most successful in the family. Helping your sister with one wedding. It's just what family does." There it was. Twist S2, right out of the playbook. Guilt wrapped in pleasantries. I kept my voice even. "It's not about the money, Mom. It's about being volunteered without my consent." She blinked. "But you always help. That's who you are." "No," I said. "That's who you expect me to be." She leaned forward, whispering as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Seraphine is trying. She's had a rough few years." "And I haven't?" I asked, louder than I meant to. A few patrons looked up from their sandwiches. "Or does being the responsible one mean my stress doesn't count?" She sighed. "You're overreacting." Of course I was. I paid the check before she could reach for it, instinct more than generosity, and walked out without a goodbye. That night, I sat in my car in the garage. I played back our entire conversation, every sugar-coated barb, every assumption that I would, again, fold quietly. I saved it. Folder name, Documentation. A few days passed. Seraphine invited me to a pre-wedding brunch. "Just a little gathering," she said. "Very low-key." I went. Mostly to observe. It was at a vineyard event space. White tablecloths, floral centerpieces, the works. A chalkboard near the seating area listed each guest's name. I scanned the list, saw Cousin Paul, Uncle Nate, Bridesmaid Chloe. Then I saw it. The sponsor. My name wasn't on it. Just that label, in bold, hand-lettered calligraphy. Twist S16. One of Seraphine's high school friends let out a loud laugh when she read it. "Oh my God, that's hilarious," she said. "She really put you down like a donor." I stood still, biting the inside of my cheek. Seraphine saw me see it, then looked away. I didn't make a scene. I didn't say a word. I sat down and smiled through the entire brunch, posed for pictures, clinked glasses, laughed when someone toasted the world's most supportive sister. But in my head, I was building something. Quietly, deliberately. Later that evening, I pulled into my driveway, left the engine running. I replayed the lunch recording with Mom. "You're the most successful. It's just what family does. You always help." Save. Backed up to the cloud. That night, my phone buzzed. Seraphine. "So excited about our trip, sis. Hope you're finalizing the wire transfer this week." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened a new note and typed, "If being the good one means being silent, I'm done with good." I wasn't going to confront her yet. First, I needed a witness. The text came late Friday evening, just after I'd poured myself a glass of red and sat down to go through some files. Seraphine's message popped up like it hadn't been days since she tried to guilt-trip me into paying for her fantasy wedding. "Private fitting tomorrow at 10. Just you, me, and some bubbles. My treat. You deserve it." She never said thank you. Not really, but she knew how to coat her manipulation in glitter and smiles. I replied with a simple, "See you then," and sat back in my chair. It wasn't trust that made me go. It was curiosity. An instinct. The boutique was downtown, nestled between a spa and a candle store that smelled like sage and overpriced linen. I arrived a few minutes early and took my time stepping in. The space was too white, too curated, like someone's Pinterest board had come to life. "Scarlett!" Seraphine beamed, arms outstretched like we hadn't just had silence and tension simmering for days. "You look tired. Busy week?" "I manage," I said, walking in carefully, scanning the room. A wedding planner I didn't recognize sat near the back, thumbing through a folder. Beside her stood a woman in a sleek pantsuit holding a notary stamp. The dress was on a mannequin, dramatic and dripping in crystals. Champagne glasses already waited on a mirrored tray. "Thought we could finalize a few details while I try this beauty on," Seraphine said, already slipping into performance mode. "You know, travel, guests, hotel stuff. Nothing major." She handed me a clipboard. "Just a formality. Confirms the guest list for Paris and aligns the deposits for the planners. You know this stuff." I smiled tightly and took it, scanning the top page. It was labeled Itinerary Acknowledgement, but something about the phrasing felt off. There were too many bullet points, too many numbers. "Mind if I take this home and look it over properly?" I asked, flipping a few pages. Seraphine's lips pulled just slightly. "It's just logistics, Scar. You don't trust me?" I didn't answer. The notary shifted her stance, clearly uneasy. "I'll feel better reading it without all the sparkle," I said, gesturing to the room. Seraphine gave a dramatic sigh. "Fine, but don't wait too long. These vendors don't do second chances." I slipped the folder into my tote and stayed long enough to let her try on the dress. She twirled like a reality show bride, fishing for compliments. I gave none. I left soon after, mumbling about needing to catch up on work. Back home, I made a fresh cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table, pulling the document back out. I read every line. And then I read them again. Buried in page 5 was an authorization for expense management clause. Another page noted Scarlett McKenna as co-signer on a joint travel fund. Further down, a binding agreement to reimburse any and all payments made by the bride on behalf of international guests. 27 names. My chest tightened, not from shock, but from familiarity. This wasn't a slip. It was calculated. I opened my scanner app, marked the red flag lines, and saved everything into a new subfolder. Deception, Layer 1. The next morning, the phone call came. Unknown number. I answered, expecting a client. "Hi, this is Paula from Southern Coastal Bank. We're following up on a trust account recently filed for verification. Under you and a Miss Seraphine McKenna?" My hand froze midair. "I'm sorry, what trust account?" I asked. She paused. "It was opened yesterday. The authorization came with a signed affidavit attached. We just need to confirm your email on file before finalizing." "I didn't sign anything," I said calmly, though every muscle in my body tensed. There was silence. Then, "You didn't authorize this?" "No, and I need that document sent to me immediately." I gave her my contact. 10 minutes later, the email came through. There it was, my signature, dated, notarized, and pasted onto a form I'd never seen. Twist S10 wasn't just betrayal, it was fraud. I didn't scream. I didn't call Seraphine. I opened my laptop, created a folder labeled Legal Trail, and dragged the forged file in. I attached the doc to a draft email addressed to my lawyer, typing one sentence. Urgent meeting requested. Possible financial fraud involving my name. Then I saved a backup copy on an external drive, tucked it into the drawer beneath my checkbooks. No dramatics, no outbursts, just evidence. Later that afternoon, I pulled up my contacts, scrolled to Seraphine, and hit Edit. I deleted her name. I changed it to Exhibit A. Saturday morning, after a restless night and 2 cups of strong coffee, I drove to the east side of Charleston, to a small cafe tucked between a used bookstore and a thrift shop with faded mannequins in the window. It was quiet, just like I needed. I got there 10 minutes early, chose a table by the window, and kept my coat on. The wait wasn't long, but my fingers fidgeted with the hem of my sleeve, like I was still that uncertain 23-year-old waiting for her dad to show up to her college graduation. And he didn't. But this time, he did. Cormac walked in with slower steps than I remembered. His hair was grayer, beard more salt than pepper. He scanned the room, and when our eyes met, he gave a cautious nod. He didn't smile, but something softened in his face. "Scarlett," he said as he sat down, "you look steady." I almost laughed. Steady. That word again. "I manage," I said. We didn't rush into the heavy stuff. We talked about Charleston weather, a book he was reading, how he still made his own coffee, even though there was a Starbucks 2 blocks away. There was a gentle awkwardness between us, not cold, just unfamiliar. 7 years since a real conversation leaves gaps no small talk can fill. Eventually, I steered us there. "I know we haven't talked about it, but Seraphine's wedding. She's been crossing lines, big ones." He exhaled, slow. "I figured. You always cleaned up after her, even when you were kids." I looked down, tracing a finger along the coffee cup rim. This time, she forged a signature on a financial document. Mine. Cormac nodded once, then reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a weathered envelope, sealed with Scotch tape at both ends. "You might want this," he said, sliding it across the table. I opened it carefully. Inside was a copy of a property transfer from over a decade ago. My mother's signature on it, except it wasn't hers. Not even close. "I kept that in case the day ever came," he said. "Seraphine forged your mother's name to move money. I tried to bring it up back then, but, well, no one wanted to hear it." My throat tightened. Twist S4 hit not with shock, but with confirmation. She'd done this before. She just never got caught. "If she's doing it again," he added, "you need to protect yourself. Don't wait for anyone's permission." I tucked the envelope into my bag and nodded. We sat in silence for a bit longer. Not uncomfortable, just honest. When we parted, he said, "You didn't deserve what they made you carry." And I believed him. That night, I was lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling when my phone buzzed. A Facebook message. From Megan Andrews. I hadn't seen her name since we wore matching polos for high school tennis. "Hey, weird question," the message read. "Did your sister ever try to take out a loan in your name?" I sat up slowly, heart picking up speed. She continued, "I remember in college, Seraphine asked me if I knew how student loans worked under someone else's credit. Said you had amazing credit for someone so boring. I thought it was a joke." Twist S11 landed like a dull thud. It wasn't about just this wedding, or the fake dress thank you, or the brunch ambush. This was a pattern, a long-standing one. I replied, "She tried, didn't succeed then, but she's still at it." Megan answered, "I'm sorry, I wish I'd said something back then. I didn't know she'd really go that far." I didn't blame her, no one ever does, until it's too late. Later, standing in front of my bathroom mirror, I held the envelope from my father in one hand and my phone in the other, still open to Megan's message. The reflection staring back at me didn't look broken. It looked clear. "I wasn't being paranoid," I whispered. "I was just too damn polite." I drove home from the meeting with my father and Megan's message playing on loop in my head. I didn't sleep much that night. I replayed every moment, every apology I swallowed, every favor they called in, every time I bit my tongue for the sake of keeping the peace. And now, I was done making room for people who mistook my silence for submission. By Thursday, the message came in. "Seraphine again. Let's have a real talk. Just us. No drama. I want to apologize. Franco's at 6? She even used the winking emoji. The nerve of her. Franco's. The same restaurant where our parents used to celebrate anniversaries before everything fell apart. I hadn't set foot in that place in years. But I knew why she picked it. She wanted to layer the conversation with nostalgia. Make it harder to walk away. I said yes. But this time, I packed differently. My phone fully charged, a backup power bank, documents in a folder marked "in case of escalation," a small voice recorder in my purse, just in case. At 5:45, I pulled into the small lot behind Franco's. I parked under a street lamp, choosing a spot with a clear line of sight from the host stand. If something felt off, I wasn't going to sit through it. By 6 wide, I was at the table, a small booth in the corner, the kind that curves like a smile meant to keep you close. I ordered water and nothing else. At 6:13, Seraphine walked in. Of course she was late, wearing a cream blazer and holding a designer tote. But she wasn't alone. 3 men followed her in, tall, built. One wore a sports coat, another had a folder in hand. The third walked slowly, eyes scanning the room. I didn't flinch, just watched. They all approached like they were part of the reservation. One of them nodded toward the hostess, who didn't even ask questions. Seraphine slid into the booth across from me, and the men took positions nearby. 2 standing, one sitting at a neighboring table close enough to listen. "Scarlett," she said, smiling like nothing was out of place. "Thanks for coming." I glanced at the folder in her hand. "You said this was a talk." "It is, but I thought, maybe we can make things official to avoid confusion." She opened the folder and slid a document toward me. "It's just a simple authorization to help with the wedding planning, nothing major." I picked it up without touching it. Read the header. "Temporary Financial Delegate, Event Support Authorization." "You want me to sign over temporary control of my accounts?" I asked, meeting her gaze. "It's just for the vendors," she said sweetly. "You're busy. I figured this would simplify everything." I looked at the 3 men. One cracked his knuckles. Another looked out the window, disinterested, but present. "You brought muscle," I said flatly. She leaned in slightly. Twist S6 arrived, not with shouting, but with a whisper. "Sign it, or face the consequences." I looked down at the paper again, my name already typed. Spaces for bank info left blank, lines for initials. I slid it back. "If you go one step further, Seraphine, you'll cross a line you won't be able to step back from." Her smile didn't falter. "This isn't personal, Scar. It's just family stuff. You're being overly sensitive again." I stood slowly, never raising my voice. I nodded to the waiter who'd been pretending not to watch. I picked up my purse, made sure the recorder had saved, and turned toward the door. Behind me, she called out, "You're really going to walk out like this, after everything I've done for you?" I didn't answer. My car was cool when I slid in. The air smelled like vanilla from the air freshener I forgot to change. I locked the doors, plugged in my phone, and pulled up the audio file. Every word, every threat, every silence. I clicked Save As and typed in a name that felt final. Final proof. Initiate. Back home, the silence felt sharper than usual. Not the comforting kind. This was the stillness before a reckoning. I kicked off my shoes by the front door, set my purse down, and walked straight to the dining table where my laptop waited. The sunlight from the late afternoon poured across the floor like a quiet warning. Time's up. I transferred the audio from Franco's dinner to my main drive, then uploaded a backup to the cloud. My legal trail folder was growing by the hour. I labeled this one simply Threat Dinner. It sounded absurd, but it was accurate. After all, she'd said it clearly enough. Sign it, or face the consequences. And she brought backup. Not friends, not family, backup. I poured myself a glass of water, sat down, and began outlining my report to the attorney. Everything needed to be precise: dates, documents, witnesses, patterns. I listed the false invoices Seraphine had submitted for event logistics, even though I never agreed to pay for anything. I included the forged financial form, the voice memo from Mom, the original property transfer from Dad. All of it. Just after 9 p.m., my phone buzzed. Amy, my cousin, had sent me a series of screenshots with no comment, just the images. It was a thread from the family group chat, the one I wasn't in anymore. The most recent message was from my mother, not Seraphine, my mother. Scarlett's always talking about how much she cares, but what does she ever actually do? Twist S14 came like a knife I saw coming, but couldn't move fast enough to block. Another message from an aunt chimed in. She's always been so sensitive. We're just trying to plan a wedding. And another. She's making it about her again. It wasn't just Seraphine. It never had been. They were all behind my back, painting a version of me that was easier for them to justify using. I was the one with no kids, no husband, the flexible schedule, the good job, the invisible glue they relied on, but resented the moment I asked for space. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I sat quietly and reread each message, letting the familiarity of the dismissal settle in my bones. I left the phone on the couch and walked to the old cabinet in the hallway. Tucked behind a box of Christmas lights was a stack of letters I hadn't touched in years. Cards from birthdays, some condolences after Dad moved out, a few thinking of you notes from church friends long faded into memory. Halfway through the stack, I found it. A pale blue envelope addressed in the soft cursive I knew belonged to Aunt Marion, Dad's younger sister. She passed 5 years ago, quietly, after a long illness she didn't tell anyone about until it was too late. She had always been the one who looked me in the eye when I spoke, who told me I wasn't wrong for needing quiet. I never opened the envelope. At the time, I wasn't ready. Tonight, I was. Inside was a single sheet of paper, creased once down the middle. The ink was slightly smudged, like she'd paused mid-thought. Scarlett, you were always the one with the quiet heart, the one who saw everything, but never needed to be seen. Don't ever let them take your goodness and rename it weakness. Twist S13 didn't feel like pain. It felt like air after drowning. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. The tears didn't fall hard, just a slow sting that came with relief, with truth. I sat on the floor for a while, legs folded beneath me, reading the words over and over until I had them memorized. Then I stood, walked to my desk, and scanned the letter. I added it to a new folder. Folder name, Legacy. Before bed, I opened my calendar, scrolled past client calls and dentist appointments, and moved the court date to the top. Not because I was nervous, because I was ready. The morning of the meeting, I woke before my alarm. I sat on the edge of my bed with the same tension I used to feel before job interviews, except this wasn't about employment. This was war. And I wasn't going in with a resume. I was walking in with proof. I dressed simply. A navy blouse, black slacks, no jewelry besides my father's watch, worn more for grounding than style. The manila envelope lay waiting on my kitchen counter, along with my tablet and backup copies of everything. The audio files, the documents, even Aunt Marion's letter. Not because I planned to use all of it today, but because I'd learned the hard way. Never show up to a negotiation with just your intentions. Franco's was already buzzing when I arrived. Waiters in crisp aprons rushed between tables, carrying wine and plates of pasta. The same olive tree stood in the corner, lights threaded through its branches like a permanent holiday. I took a seat in the back booth, our parents' booth, once upon a time. I ordered espresso, black, no sugar. The manila envelope rested beside my tablet, and I opened a document on screen titled Timeline of Deception. I wasn't stalling. I was reviewing. Rereading her patterns made the rage go quiet. It reminded me that what I was doing wasn't revenge. It was survival. At 6:14, Seraphine walked in. No guards this time, no fake smiles trailing behind her. Just her, dressed like a lawyer, pretending to be a sister. She slid into the seat across from me like we'd planned brunch. "Let's talk like sisters," she said, her voice just above the hum of the restaurant. I nodded once. No smile. "Let's!" I didn't speak again. I just reached into my tote and placed the envelope on the table. Slowly, deliberately. She glanced at it, then at me. "Scarlett?" I placed my phone face down next to it. Then I said calmly, "You know what this is." Her lips parted slightly. She blinked. I opened the flap and pulled out one of the documents. The one from 10 years ago, the one Dad gave me. "This is the original asset transfer from 2013. The one you forged Mom's signature on. You remember that?" Twist S12 didn't land with drama. It landed with gravity. "You told her it was temporary," I added. "But it wasn't. And what you're doing now is the same script. Different year." Seraphine didn't deny it. She didn't reach for the paper. She just stared at it like it was a spider crawling across the table. "I've already filed the complaint," I said. "With the bank, with my attorney, with the notary who allegedly witnessed my signature. I have the logs, the digital metadata, the call recordings, everything." Still, she said nothing. So I waved gently toward the bar. A young server with dark glasses turned and nodded, then led over a man in a plain blue button-up and jeans. He looked like someone's uncle, or a school teacher, but in his hand was a leather folder. "This is John," I said. "He works with my lawyer." John placed the folder gently on the table and opened it. Seraphine's eyes finally moved. Just a flick. "You're being served," I told her. Then I smiled just a little. In 3, 2, 1. Twist S7 dropped between us like a gavel. The silence that followed was different from any we'd ever shared. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't tense. It was final. John thanked us both and stepped back. Seraphine stared at the papers. Her face didn't crumble, but it cracked, just a little around the edges. "I loved you once," I said, "but I love my peace more." I stood, took my tablet, slid the envelope back into my bag, and I left. Behind me, I heard her voice, low, sharp, clinging to something that was slipping away. "This isn't over." I didn't turn around. I stepped into the warm Charleston air, let the door shut behind me, and said aloud, without raising my voice, "Oh, it is." The following Tuesday, I received a text from my mother. Short, formal, no emojis. "Family lunch, this Sunday, noon, no drama. We can still salvage this." Salvage what? The illusion? I read it twice before setting the phone face down on the counter. There was no apology, no hint of reflection, just a command wrapped in suggestion. And yet, I went. Maybe I needed to hear what they'd say when they thought the storm had passed, when they assumed I was done fighting. Maybe a part of me still wanted someone, anyone, to acknowledge what had been done. The house looked the same. White shutters, blue hydrangeas in bloom, too many throw pillows on the porch swing. The front door was slightly ajar when I arrived, and I let myself in without knocking. The smell of baked chicken and rosemary greeted me before anyone else did. They were already seated, Seraphine at the head of the table like she'd always belonged there, our mother beside her, and the others, cousins, uncles, spouses, scattered along the sides. I took the empty seat nearest the window, not that anyone had offered it. There was no eye contact, no one asked how I was. They passed the bread, commented on the weather, laughed at a meme someone shared. And then, as if reading from a script she'd memorized long ago, my mother raised her glass. "To Seraphine," she said with pride swelling in every syllable. "My visionary, the one with a future. Twist S15. A blow dressed in a toast." I didn't move. Then she added, "Scarlett's always been the quiet one, the one who does what she's told." The table chuckled softly. Someone muttered, "That's true," like it was harmless. I pulled my phone from my pocket, unlocked it, and set it on the table. Calmly, casually. Then I tapped play. A voice filled the room, familiar, unmistakable. My mother's, clear as daylight. "Scarlett? She has nothing. Never did." Twist S8 hit like a thunderclap. Forks paused midair. Napkins froze in laps. Seraphine stared at her plate. No one said a word. I looked around the table, slowly, carefully. One by one, they dropped their gazes. The silence wasn't respect, it was fear. Fear of being next, fear of their own words being played back. I stood, not rushed, not theatrical. This family tried to replace truth with tradition, rewrite me with obedience. I turned to Seraphine. "You tried to erase me, but I made myself unerasable." Still, no one spoke. My mother looked stunned, but not ashamed, just caught. I walked toward the door, the sound of my heels on hardwood, the only rhythm in the room. As I reached for the handle, I heard her voice, softer than I'd ever heard it. "Scarlett, wait." I turned just slightly, just enough. "That's not my name anymore," I said. "Not to you." Then I walked out. The sound of the front door closing behind me that day didn't feel like escape. It felt like punctuation. Something ended when I walked out of that house. And for a while, I thought that something was the last bit of love I had left for my family. But as the days passed, I realized it was something else. What ended was the version of me they could control. Seraphine's wedding never happened. At least, not the Paris one. Within 2 weeks, half the vendors pulled out. A few had already heard whispers about unpaid deposits and mismatched invoices. Then one of her old clients came forward with accusations about misused brand funds, small at first, but enough to get the attention of someone at the agency's legal department. She went quiet on social media. That alone said more than a statement ever could. No one went to jail, no one apologized. But she lost the narrative. And in her world, that was worse. I didn't celebrate it. There was no satisfaction in watching her unravel, just a quiet sort of acceptance, a knowing that consequences sometimes don't come like thunder, but like wind slowly removing a mask. In the weeks after, I found myself settling into a routine that didn't include them. I got up early. I made real breakfast again, eggs, toast, not just coffee on the go. I joined a local women's resource center, volunteering twice a week. They had a support program for women dealing with financial abuse and family coercion. I didn't need to be a therapist. I just had to tell the truth. And people listened. "I didn't realize it was abuse," one woman said to me after a session. "I thought it was just what family does." I nodded. That's the trick. They call it love when it's really leverage. They didn't cry because of what I said. They cried because someone finally named it. I wasn't a professional, but I was living proof. One night, after one of those meetings, I got home to find a small envelope in the mail. No return address. The handwriting stopped me, cold. My mother's. I didn't have to open it to know. Inside was a single card. "I was wrong," it read. "You were always more than the quiet one." No signature, no request to talk, just that. I sat on the edge of the bed, card in hand, for a long time. I didn't feel anger, not even closure. I just felt distance. I didn't write back. I didn't call. Instead, I lit a small candle and placed it on the windowsill. Not for them. For the girl I used to be. The one who stood in kitchens offering to clean up after others. The one who swallowed comments, gave without question, and only asked to be seen. She'd done enough, and now she could rest. Weeks later, I stood at the front of a small community classroom at the Women's Center. Folding chairs in a circle, cheap coffee in the corner, the smell of dry erase markers in the air. I held Aunt Marion's letter in my hand. I read it slowly, out loud. Don't let them rename your goodness. The women around me nodded. Some wiped away tears. One whispered, "That's exactly what happened to me." I smiled, not for the pain, but for the recognition. The moment someone realized they weren't imagining it, that they were never too much, or too little, just never properly seen. Later, I walked to my car under the soft yellow of the streetlight. I didn't check my phone, didn't glance at social media. There was nothing left to monitor, no one to prove anything to. As I started the engine, I said out loud, like a vow to myself, freedom didn't come when they apologized. It came the day I stopped needing them to. Sometimes standing up to your own family is the hardest thing you'll ever do, but also the most necessary, because silence doesn't keep the peace, it preserves the problem. Have you ever felt like the quiet one in your family? The one expected to absorb, endure, and never speak out? Let me know in the comments below, and if this story hit close to home, don't forget to subscribe for more real, raw stories about family, power, and reclaiming your voice.